Hey, this is Derek. We're working through one chapter a day of Atomic Habits by James Clear. Let's remind ourselves why we're here today. It's January of 2021. Today is January 8th. The statistic is that a lot of people, including myself, make New Year's resolutions. The sad statistic is that a lot of people, including myself, rarely keep those New Year's resolutions for very long. In fact, by January 12th, most people have left their New Year's resolutions and their habits and their goals behind and have given up. So the goal is to work through a chapter of this book, Atomic Habits, day by day. It's going to take us about 3 weeks into January. And if you're following along with me, the goal is to keep going past the slump date of January 12th, to keep going through the end of January, to keep going through the year, so that at this time next year, if you're watching this with me, we're in January 2021, so at this time next year in January of 2022, we will be able to look back and say we kept our goals, we kept our New Year's resolutions for 2021. So we've learned a couple really important things so far about habits and about goals. One of the most important things we learned from the first chapter is that unsuccessful people and successful people make the same goals. It's a matter of the habits and the processes that they put in place. And this is a statement that rings really true with me. We do not rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our habits and our processes. So far, we've talked about having a new identity. If you haven't watched the second video yet on chapter 2, it's maybe the most important one that I've recorded so far. It's about how to change your identity and how to change your habits. There's a 2-step process to changing your identity. The fact of the matter is, the step number 1 is choose the type of person that you want to be, the type of identity you want to have. And then the second step is take small actions every day to become that type of person. So today we're talking about motivation and how to actually create new habits. Motivation is overrated. It's all about our environment. It's all about the context. So we talk about the idea that in a hospital cafeteria, people started drinking more water, buying more water from the cafeteria when the water was placed in more areas, and placed in more obvious areas. Why? Because the water was there. When people see water to drink, they choose to buy the water and drink the water. Nobody said anything. Nobody put any extra signs up to say, drink more water. It's simply that the environment, the context of the room changed and people's behavior changed accordingly. Habits are context driven. Habits are context driven. In fact, it's really easy to say behavior is a function of only 2 things. Behavior, which is super complicated if we boil it down, is a function of a person and their environment. So different people in a different environment have different habits, but in a particular environment, a person will always do the same things over and over and over again. Environment, the context that we live in, the environment that we live in, is the invisible hand that shapes human behavior. And when you think about it, it's really incredible to think about, because so often we try and change an individual piece, or we try and change our habits without changing the world or the room or the house or the friends around us. Well, that's why our habits don't change, is because we're trying to change the wrong thing. Our habits are driven by us being in a certain context. A small change, such as changing the environment, moving things around in a room, can create a massive change. So we consume our environment. We're subject to an environment, but we're not just subject to it. We can also create it. We can also be the architect of our environment. And so think about this. If you want to remember, these are examples from the book. If you want to remember to take your medicine each night, put your pill bottle right next to the faucet of the bathroom counter. So change the environment a little bit. Don't just be motivated to take your medicine, actually change the environment. If you want to drink more water, fill up a few water bottles each morning and place them in common locations around the house. And simply by seeing these things, you will begin to adopt these new habits. The body has, I think, 11 million different receptors in which we experience the world around us. I think it's 9 or 10 million of the 11 receptors are all devoted to sight. Sight is the most common thing that we interact with our environment in. And so if you want to change your habit, if you want to change your environment, change the way it looks. Make sure the choice is the most obvious one. Make sure the best choice is the most obvious one, because the most obvious one wins out. If I'm trying to start a habit and I hide the pill bottle for some reason, taking my medicine each night, it's not going to win out. You got to make it obvious. You got to create the environment that supports and helps you create the habit that you want to have. Most people, including myself when I think about it, most of us live in a world that others have created. We go to work, we walk into a gas station, we walk into a hospital, a cafeteria, whatever it is. People have created that environment. And most of us live in a world that other people have created. But the good news is that we also have choices about the environment that we live in, especially when it comes to maybe our office or our bedroom or our house. We get to create an environment that supports the habits that we want. So be the designer of your world and not just the consumer of it. And when you start making the choice to design the environment that supports the habits you want, you know what begins to happen? Exactly what you want to happen. You adopt new habits, not because you gained all this motivation all of a sudden, but simply because you created and formed an environment to support the habit that you want. Context is really, really important. The way we see things. Think about it this way. People can walk into the same room. People can see a cigarette and have two completely different responses. One person will see a cigarette and all of a sudden they want to smoke the cigarette. Another person is repulsed by the smell. The context is key, and the context has everything to do with how I interpret the environment. So it's not just the object like a cigarette, or it's not just the phone, it's my interpretation of the object that forms the habit. Something to think about: if you're going to really, really change a habit, you got to put yourself in a new environment. Simply changing an old environment helps, but if you can create a brand new environment, it'll be incredibly easier to start a new habit. There was a study about soldiers that came back from, I forget what war, but a lot of them were users. They used drugs when they were overseas, and they assumed that when they came back to the States, they would have the same problem of continuing to be druggies, to continue using drugs. But the fact of the matter is, when they came back home, a small fraction of them continued using. Why? Because the habit was formed overseas when the context was completely different. Back home, then the environment was completely brand new, completely different, and the cues that caused them to use drugs before weren't there anymore. And so, like cold turkey, they stopped. Why? Not because they had an incredible motivation, but because they had a brand new environment. A great thing the author brings up is this idea of one space, one use. So think about your couch, for example. If you want your couch to be a place where you relax, then don't bring your computer there and plan to work there. If you want your bed to be a place where you rest and go to sleep, don't place your computer or don't place your phone right next to it and do some work on your bed. One place, one use. The context for bed is going to sleep, so make it a place where you go to sleep. On your couch, one place, one use. The context that you want, the trigger, the habit that you want to support is one of relaxation. So don't confuse the cue of the couch being one where you're not sure whether you're supposed to work or whether you're supposed to relax. One space, one use. Create the environment that supports the habit that you want. Every habit should have a home. I never thought about this before. Every habit should have a home. If I want to go running, I need to place my shoes where they're going to be seen so that I can put them on in that cue. Every time I see my shoes there, I want to go running. If I want to go relax at the couch is the place I go to relax. Every habit should have a home. And again, this is all about designing the environment to support the habits we want. In my world of financial coaching, I think about creating a budget or even staying on budget. If I don't pull up Amazon on my phone when I'm sitting on the couch, if I make that a rule, then that is my rule, and I don't find myself scrolling through Amazon while I'm on the couch, because the couch is the place for relaxing, not the place for buying. Every habit has to have a home. So the thing I want you to remember from today, it's two things I want you to remember. We are most likely to notice the things that stand out. So if you want to create a new habit, pick a cue that you can see. Pick a cue that's obvious that you can see. The context has everything to do with your new habits. So design your environment to support the habit that you want. And like that, it's not more about motivation. It's more about the environment. It's more about the context in which you're doing the habit. So think about the habits you want to create. Think about the best environment for them to happen, and then pick a visible cue that triggers the habit. I'm working on this. It's completely changing my life, and I hope it's changing your life 2. So tomorrow we start with A Secret to Self-Control, and it's actually not the secret that you think it is. It's very, very interesting read. I hope you're back tomorrow.